This week on Vaticano, Pope Francis invites the faithful to dedicate an evening of prayer for peace in Ukraine.
After that, she ran away from the custody of the kidnapper.
Meet Sumera Shafiq, a Catholic lawyer fighting to end forced child marriages in Pakistan. Dive deep into papal history and explore the Lateran Palace, the original home of the Roman pontiffs. For this and more, Vaticano starts now.
Hello and welcome to EWTN Vatican. My name is Andrea Stonehauser and I'm the Vatican Bureau Chief here in Rome. We want to present to you the latest news and the stories behind the scenes of the Holy See here in this eternal city, and you can follow all of those stories on our YouTube channel and the other social media channels. Please make sure to subscribe. Also subscribe to our email and you will receive a weekly update on everything that is going on here in Rome.
Tensions are still high on the border between Russia and Ukraine, and observers warn that a new war on European soil could take place. Recently, Pope Francis showed great concern for the situation in Eastern Europe.
I'm greatly concerned with the increase of tensions that threaten to inflict a new blow to peace in Ukraine.
With these words, Pope Francis invited the faithful to pray for peace in Ukraine and to set up a special day for prayer for the whole Church on January 26th. Ukrainian and Polish bishops reacted immediately to the Pope's invitation and released a joint statement saying that the current situation represents a great danger for the entire European continent and that war can never be an adequate means of solving international problems. Tensions have escalated at the Russia-Ukrainian border due to recent talks on making Ukraine a NATO member. Russian leaders considered this a threat and responded by bringing 100,000 troops to perform military drills at its border with Ukraine. As a result, Europe and the US deemed Russia's move as a threat and fear Russia will invade Ukraine. On the day of prayer, on January 26th, during the general audience, the Holy Father expressed his desire that the faithful's prayers would rise up to heaven and touch the hearts of world leaders, so that dialogue may prevail and the common good be placed ahead of partisan interests.
Please, no more war.
In the afternoon, Archbishop Paul Gallagher, the Holy See's Secretary for Relations with States, presided over the prayer for peace in Ukraine at the Basilica of Santa Maria in Trastevere. The Russian ambassador to the Holy See, as well as the ambassadors of Ukraine and the United States, attended the prayer service also. Archbishop Gallagher prayed, "May the winds of war be silenced, and may the wounds of men, women and children be preserved from the horrors of conflict."
Hello and welcome to this week's Vaticano update with the most important news from the Vatican. The Donations to the Vatican's Peter Pence collection fell by 15% in 2021, the Vatican announced recently. The prefect of the Secretariat for the Economy spoke of a distinct decrease in donations compared to the years before, especially since 2020. Reasons for that are seen in the pandemic and fewer faithful attending church. The Peter Pence is the Holy See's annual collection to finance the Roman Curia and the Pope's charitable works. Marking Holocaust Remembrance Day, the Holy Father met with 90-year-old Auschwitz survivor Edith Bruck at Casa Santa Marta. Both Pope Francis and Bruck emphasized the value of sharing memories of the past with young people. Especially those should hear from the older generation in order to avoid making similar mistakes. In a meeting with Catholic journalists on COVID-19 and fact-checking, Pope Francis called them to seek and report the truth. The journalists were members of a media consortium receiving funds from Google to report on COVID-19. Pope Francis invited them to fight disinformation. The Holy Father reminded the media representatives to take a stand against injustices and lies and always be in favor of people. Pope Francis appointed 2 new auxiliary bishops for the Archdiocese of New York. At the age of 45, Father Espaillat will be the youngest bishop in the United States. He's the director of the Hispanic Catholic Charismatic Renewal and host of the YouTube podcast entitled Sainthood in the City. Online, he's known for rapping about the gospel. He wants to reach out specifically to young people and inspire them to come to church. The Spanish bishops at Limina visits ended last week. The Holy Father petitioned the bishops to stay close to God through prayer. They also discussed ideological colonization and the Synod of Synodality, encouraging the faithful to get involved in the preparation phase of this global process. Thank you for being with us and enjoy the rest of Vaticano. Andreas Tonhauser for EWTN from Rome.
In a few moments, we'll be back with more on Vaticano. February the 8th marks the feast of St. Josephine Bakita, a Sudanese nun who, as a child, was a victim of human trafficking.
Oggi ricorre la giornata mondiale.
In 2015, Pope Francis established the International Day of Prayer and Awareness Against Human Trafficking, to be observed on the feast day of St. Josephine Bakita. According to the International Labour Organization, there are 40.3 million victims of human trafficking worldwide, and the people most at risk are women and girls. This year's theme for the Day of Prayer is The Power of Care: Women, Economics, Human Trafficking.
Forced marriages in terms of there is...
EWTN's Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Thornhauser brings us a story of a Christian girl from Pakistan who was a victim of forced marriage and is fighting for her freedom.
मुझे ज़बरदस्ती अगवा किया गया था और कुछ पेपर्स पे प्रेशराइज करके मुझे कुछ पेपर्स पे साइन करवाए गए.
Mera, whose identity needs to be obscured for security reasons, was 14 years old when she was kidnapped on the way to school in Faisalabad, Pakistan. She was forcibly married to a man 40 years older than her. Mera's case is not an isolated one. According to human rights groups such as ADF International, she is one of 1,000 Pakistani women abducted and forcibly married every year. But not everyone accepts this. Catholic lawyer Sumera Shafiq supports Mera in her fight for liberty and justice.
The courts did not accept, even when they heard the case, they did not annul this marriage. They told the girl to go back to her abductor.
After that, she ran away from the custody of the kidnapper, and then we fight for ADF International along with me. We fight for her, for liberty, and now she is living with their parents.
Mera and Sumera Shafiq are Christians. They both belong to the small Catholic community of the country.
What is the situation of women in Pakistan, and especially those of religious minorities, also Catholics in particular?
Now, if you're talking about forced marriages, one is you're talking about when a person is underage. Now, this is happening in Pakistan, and it seems to have increased in recent years.
Are you sometimes worried that people will come after you? You're Catholic yourself, you're a woman, you're fighting for those cases. Is there a danger for you?
Yes, sometimes I was very much worried about myself, definitely, because I'm not defending only Myra, but I'm defending any other Christian girls and Hindu girls and different communities girls who are victimized to forced conversion and abduction, rape, kidnapping.
According to ADF International, Pakistan is one of the most dangerous places for a woman to be a Christian. Local authorities are often complicit in cases such as Mera's. Courts have often failed to uphold the Child Marriage Restraint Act, which sets the legal age of marriage for girls at 16 years.
Now the problem is, Islamic lawyers are saying that in Islam there is no minimum age in marriage. So they are challenging the government's law of minimum age. This is where there is a clash. Now, under the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Pakistan, we have various commissions, one of which is the Justice and Peace Commission. Our Justice and Peace Commission is also taking this up with the government. A number of NGOs, including Muslim NGOs, including the government's Human Rights Commission. So right now, there is a lot of discussion going on.
I see. So, but the church is doing a lot in this matter.
Yes, we are doing whatever we can. We are doing whatever we can.
At this moment, Mera is still fighting for her freedom, as the court in Pakistan has not handed down a judgment in her case. She still fears the authorities will send her back to her tormentor. Mera hopes for justice, and she is not alone.
Recently, a report on abuses over the course of 75 years in the Archdiocese of Munich, Germany, was presented, and the report faulted Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI and the current Archbishop of Munich, Cardinal Marx. They and others are accused of mishandling several abuse cases during their tenure. The Vaticano team went back to the archives to see what has been done in the light of growing understanding of the enormity of the abuse scandals and what Benedict has done in order to bring about greater accountability. In January 2002, American Catholicism faced one of the worst institutional and spiritual crises in history. It began when the Boston Globe raised accusations against the Catholic priest in Boston, John J. Gyohan, for abusing more than 130 minors over a 30-year period of ministry, and against his superior, Cardinal Bernard Law, for having covered up the abuses. In Rome, as the American scandal blew up, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith and its prefect, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, directly confronted it. In fact, Ratzinger had already been working against abuses in the church for years. After the sexual revolution of 1968, society had been changing. Good and evil had become relative, and some church environments were not able to escape the influence of this crisis.
Sociologists are quite suspicious of monocausal explanations, but surely one cause was the 60s, the relaxation of sexual mores, more or less in all milieus, and the idea that sexual experiments were something good and new and modern and brave and to be encouraged.
As reports of abuse of minors by clergy increased in the 1980s, it was Cardinal Ratzinger who worked to develop adequate instruments to combat these crimes justly and quickly. In 1988, he requested a change to the Church's Code of Canon Law to speed up and simplify the legal process for suspected cases of abuse. His objective was to protect victims, ensure justice, and sanction predators.
Y entonces el Papa, el Cardenal Ratzinger, entonces...
Then the prefect of the CDF, Cardinal Ratzinger, addressed the Pontifical Council for Legislative Texts. At that time, the prefect was the Venezuelan Cardinal Castillo Laura, pointing out that he found more and more frequently that the resignation from the clerical state was requested as a grace, as a gift, when what was needed was punishment, a process. Punishment because these priests had committed criminal behavior.
Y castigar porque habían cometido conductas criminales.
In his 24 years as head of the congregation, Cardinal Ratzinger had zero tolerance for priests or religious who committed abuse against minors.
El Cardenal Ratzinger fue el primero.
Cardinal Ratzinger was the first in the Roman Curia to say no. This cannot be treated as a matter of grace, but as a matter to be judged and punished, and appropriate measures to be taken. He was the first, and he was quite isolated in doing this.
Fue el primero, era bastante aislado.
In 2001, Pope St. John Paul II gave the congregation absolute control over sex abuse cases reported to Rome. Cardinal Ratzinger then published a document, the Church's norms on handling the most serious of crimes. In 2010, as Pope, he would make further modifications to improve it. In the final form of this document, bishops were legally bound to report all cases of suspected abuse by clerics in their diocese to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. The statute of limitations was extended from 10 to 20 years. Abuse of a person over 18 years of age who is developmentally disabled was added as a grave crime, and child pornography was also listed as a crime.
In particular, one of the signal achievements would be those that were implemented in 2010. In May of 2010, Sacrum Sanctitatis Tutela was updated, and some new fields which we're still developing today. In particular, we think of child pornography. Added some new crimes to the definition of the delicts against the Sixth Commandment and the codes of canon law. Vos Estis Lux Mundi has continued that and added new as we come to understand the magnitude of these issues that we're facing.
Days later, on April 2nd, 2005, Pope John Paul II died. And on April 24th, Cardinal Ratzinger succeeded him as Pope, taking the name Benedict XVI. After the 2002 American scandal, victims from other nations began to come forward. In Ireland in 2005, then in Australia, Malta, and Germany. In the face of a seemingly unprecedented spiritual crisis, Benedict XVI started a path of purification and cleansing within the Church. During his pontificate, he removed more than 400 priests convicted of sex abuse from the clerical state. He met with victims of clerical abuse 5 times during his international trips, and he exonerated the entire Church to a profound conversion and purification through acts of penance. In 2010, a letter to Irish Catholics was symbolic of his approach. He asked for forgiveness of abuse victims and strongly condemned priests and religious that stain the face of the Church with these crimes and sins.
Tristezza anche che l'autorità della Chiesa.
There is also sadness that the Church authority was not sufficiently vigilant, nor sufficiently quick and decisive to take necessary measures to stop the abuse and prevent it from occurring again. Because of all this, we are going through a period of penance, of humility, and of renewed sincerity, as I wrote to the Irish bishops. It seems to me, we really have to go through times of penance and humility, and we have to renew and learn sincerity again.
E rinnovare e reimparare una assoluta sincerità.
Under Joseph Ratzinger as Cardinal and then as Pope, progress was made in the Church's handling of abuse. Bishops have the moral and legal duty to provide an adequate response to these crimes, to care for the permanent formation of the clergy, to listen to victims and their families, and to cooperate with the civil authorities. The accusations brought against Benedict in the Munich report weigh heavily, and while Benedict denies any wrongdoing during his time as Archbishop, the Vatican points to his fight against abuse as head of the Congregation of Faith and then later as Pope. We'll be back after a short break with more on Vaticano. The Lateran Palace was the residence of the popes for about 1,000 years before the pontiffs moved to Vatican Hill. And a few days before Christmas, the palace opened its doors to visitors for the very first time.
La testimonianza.
Monsignor Pedretti, Provost of the Lateran Apostolic Palace, guides us inside and starts with the Conciliation Hall, where the Vatican City-State was born.
Here we are in the Conciliation Hall, also known as the Hall of the Popes. It is called Conciliation Hall because it takes its name from the historic event celebrated on February 11, 1929, the signing of the Lateran Pacts. On the table in the back are the original pen and inkwell with which the conflict between state and church ended.
Visitors could imagine themselves being the Roman pontiff, because even the private rooms are now open to visit.
The real news is that for the first time, the Pope's private apartment will be open to visitors. It consists of a dining room, a bedroom, a small library, then the room where the Pope would receive his guests and a secretary.
Even if the pontiffs have lived on Vatican Hill since the Middle Ages, the Lateran Palace has remained a special place for many popes, such as John XXIII, Paul VI and Pius XII, who, after having aired the first ever radio broadcast of the Angelus from Castel Gandolfo, continued the tradition right here in the Lateran.
So then, visitors can pass through all 3,000 square meters of the palace's beauty, completely set up with the help of the Vatican Museums and the Vatican Florist, which was set up in the Historical Museum along with other temporary exhibitions. Today, visitors will have a historical, artistic and cultural path to follow, and it is characterized by the relations between the state and church, between the temporal and spiritual power.
Although the Lateran Palace has not been the papal residence for a long time, there is a fundamental aspect that strongly links the pontiffs to this palace.
What is normally not known is that the Ecclesia Mater, the mother church of all churches in St. John Lateran, and it is not St. Peter's. Usually, when pilgrims come to Rome, they think it is St. Peter's because that is where the Vatican is and the Pope celebrates Mass there. Actually, this church is the mother of all churches because in the apse of St. John Lateran is the chair of Peter. The newly elected Pope by the College of Cardinals must, among his first acts, come to celebrate Mass here, which symbolizes taking possession of the chair of Peter as the Bishop of Rome, and he becomes pastor of the Universal Church.
Diventa pastore della Chiesa universale. Un dato importante.
Here is an important fact that is of no little consequence nor accidental. For some time now, Pope Francis has been signing motu proprio and many documents from St. John Lateran, various days, to testify this very deep root of the Bishop of Rome, who, as bishop, is pastor of the Universal Church.
Vescovo e pastore della Chiesa universale.
The palace can be visited every day from Monday to Saturday, excluding Wednesdays, by booking online. Visits are organised in groups with a maximum of 30 and are guided by the missionaries of Divine Revelation. This is a great opportunity to rediscover and relive the history of one of the most important buildings of our Catholic faith.